Roger Federer just gave Alex Eala a luxury watch, and the internet is losing its mind. What began as a quiet backstage gesture at the ATP Finals quickly became one of the most talked about moments in tennis, not simply because of the gift, but because of what it symbolized: respect, recognition, and a powerful message about what happens when legends acknowledge rising stars. The moment unfolded in November 2024 in Turin, Italy, during the ATP Finals, where the world's best male players had gathered, while something unexpected brewed behind the scenes in sponsor lounges and media corridors. Alex Eala wasn't even supposed to be there. She had just finished a grueling WTA 125 tournament in Spain, battling injuries, exhaustion, and a punishing season marked by qualifiers, early major exits, and relentless pressure at just 22 years old as she fought to prove she belonged among the elite. Her management secured her an invite to a private Nike event alongside the ATP Finals, a rare networking opportunity, and though she almost skipped it due to mental fatigue, something compelled her to attend. Inside a dimly lit private suite overlooking the main court, surrounded by players, coaches, executives, and clinking champagne glasses, Eala stayed on the fringes, uneasy in a space women's tennis so rarely shares with the men's circuit, fully aware of the imbalance in pay, attention, and respect. Then she saw him, Roger Federer, retired for 2 years yet still the most magnetic presence in the room, laughing and talking with sponsors, unaware that what would follow would soon capture the attention of the entire sports world. Relaxed and at ease, Federer was there as a guest of honor, a living legend who had long transcended the sport. Eala had watched him win Wimbledon when she was a child, studying his movement, his composure, and his grace under pressure, and now he stood just 10 meters away. She didn't approach him, she wouldn't dare. But fate had other plans. Federer's eyes swept across the room and, for a brief moment, landed on her. He paused mid-conversation, excused himself without hesitation, and walked straight toward her. Eala froze as he extended his hand and offered that familiar warm smile before saying words she would never forget, that he had been following her journey and admired how she fought like a champion. She barely managed to respond, her mind racing at the realization that Roger Federer not only knew who she was but had watched her matches. It felt unreal, and yet it was only the beginning. This wasn't just a casual compliment. Federer had something else in mind, something that would soon send shockwaves through the tennis world. Their conversation lasted only minutes but felt like an eternity as he asked about her season, her goals, and her mindset, speaking with a genuine curiosity that made her feel truly seen, not as a stat line or a prospect, but as a person and a fighter. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Some nearby thought he was pulling out a phone, others a business card, but when his hand emerged holding a small, elegant deep blue box, the room seemed to hold its breath. It was unmistakable, a Rolex box. Eala's eyes widened as Federer opened it slowly to reveal a rose-gold Rolex Daytona with a white dial, one of the most iconic luxury watches in the world, a timepiece worth more than many lower-tier players earn in a year. Looking at her, he simply said that he wanted her to have it. Federer said it calmly, not because of what she had achieved yet, but because of how fiercely she fought for it. The room fell silent as other guests began to notice, phones subtly lifting to capture the moment. Eala stood there speechless, her hands trembling as she accepted the box, instinctively trying to refuse and insisting it was too much. Federer simply shook his head and told her she reminded him of himself at her age, hungry, relentless, and quietly wondering if the world would ever recognize it. He urged her to wear it as a reminder that she belonged. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered a thank you that felt painfully inadequate. Federer smiled, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, and walked away. When she opened the box again, the watch gleamed under the soft, golden lighting, but something else caught her attention. On the back of the case was an engraving. She tilted it toward the light and read the words, "To those who fight beyond the baseline RF." Her breath caught. This wasn't a random gift, it was personal, deliberate, a message from one fighter to another. Within 30 minutes, the moment had leaked online: blurry photos, shaky videos of Federer handing her the box, clips of her tearful reaction spreading across Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, and TikTok like wildfire. The internet erupted. What began as a beautiful gesture quickly turned into one of the most controversial moments in tennis, because while many saw inspiration, others saw favoritism, and the backlash came fast and brutal. The first wave, however, was pure admiration, with fans calling it a class act and praising a legend for lifting up the next generation. The word generation barely settled before Federer's name began trending worldwide within hours. Eala's follower count exploded, and videos of the moment racked up millions of views almost instantly. But the mood soon shifted. Tennis forums lit up with questions. Why Alex Eala? Why not Coco Gauff, fresh off a US Open win? Why not Iga Swiatek, the dominant force in women's tennis, or Emma Raducanu, whose Cinderella run had captivated the world? Accusations followed quickly, claims of favoritism, whispers of a Nike-orchestrated publicity stunt, conspiracy theories suggesting the moment had been staged or even paid for. One viral tweet scoffed that Federer had gifted a Rolex to a player ranked outside the top 100 while real champions were ignored, while another argued this was everything wrong with tennis, where stars were rewarded and everyone else was left behind. The backlash didn't stay online. Anonymous player quotes appeared in tabloids, with one unnamed WTA competitor admitting it was painful to watch someone receive such recognition while others grinded in silence. Analysts debated it on ESPN, podcasts dissected it endlessly, and opinions split sharply, some defending Federer's right to give a personal gift, others insisting it sent the wrong message about success being tied to connections rather than merit. Eala remained silent for 48 hours as her team urged her to wait it out, but the noise only intensified. Then she posted a simple Instagram story. No caption, just a photo of the watch on her wrist with a single line overlaid: "This isn't about the gift. It's about being seen." The post went viral immediately. Supporters rallied, sharing her stats, her injuries, her financial struggles, and her resilience, framing her as a symbol of an entire generation of players slipping through the cracks of the system. Critics, however, called it entitled and tone-deaf, a rising player flaunting luxury while thousands struggled just to afford travel. As the debate raged, one question sat at the center of it all: what did the watch really mean? The answer lay in a conversation almost no one knew about, one that had taken place months earlier and explained everything. 3 months before Turin, at Wimbledon 2024, Alex Eala had fought her way through 3 grueling rounds. She had fought through qualifying just to reach the main draw, only to lose in the first round, but not without a battle. It was a grueling 3-set match against a top 30 player that stretched more than 2.5 hours, and she gave everything she had. Still, it wasn't enough. Afterward, she sat alone in the locker room with her head in her hands, the weight of disappointment crushing down on her. She had worked relentlessly, sacrificed endlessly, and yet it felt like she was still on the outside looking in, stuck in a cycle of early exits and unanswered effort. That was when Federer walked by. He was at Wimbledon as a guest, absorbing the atmosphere of the tournament he had won 8 times, when he noticed her through the open locker room door, the slumped shoulders, the quiet devastation. He knocked gently on the doorframe and told her it had been a tough match. Startled, Eala looked up and quickly wiped her eyes, embarrassed. Federer said he'd watched the last set and told her she hadn't given up once, something he called rare. Unsure how to respond, she simply nodded as Federer stepped inside and sat on the bench across from her, the beginning of a conversation she would never forget. He told her he had once lost in the first round of Wimbledon himself in 2002, as the defending champion, and that the defeat had been so brutal he thought his career was over. Eala stared at him, stunned. She had never heard that story before. Federer explained that he learned something important that day. The fight isn't always about winning, but about showing up when everything in you wants to quit, because that is what separates the good from the great. They talked for nearly 20 minutes about pressure, doubt, and the deep loneliness of life on tour, as Federer shared stories from his early career moments when he questioned whether he was good enough and times he came close to walking away entirely. Before leaving, he looked her straight in the eye and told her not to let the sport break her, saying she had something special and that he could see it. Eala never forgot that conversation. It carried her through the rest of the season, through injuries, losses, and long nights filled with doubt. And now, months later, Federer had remembered. He had followed her journey, watched her fight, and decided she deserved recognition not for winning, but for refusing to quit. The engraving on the watch wasn't random. To those who fight beyond the baseline was a reminder, a symbol, a message meant for every player who had ever felt invisible. But the world didn't know that story yet, and when Eala finally chose to share it, the entire narrative began to shift, even if not everyone was ready to listen. 2 days after her Instagram post, Eala sat down for an interview on a tennis podcast. She hadn't planned to speak publicly, but the noise had become impossible to ignore, and she felt compelled to set the record straight. Calm but emotional, she told the story of Wimbledon, the locker room conversation, Federer's unexpected kindness, and the meaning behind the watch, explaining that it was never about favoritism, but about someone believing in her when she didn't believe in herself. The interview clip spread quickly, drawing millions of views and sharply divided reactions. Many fans were deeply moved, flooding her comments with messages of support, sharing their own stories of struggling in silence, and praising her courage for speaking up. Speaking up only intensified the divide. While many supported her, Others doubled down on the criticism. A former WTA player tweeted that while she respected Federer, hundreds of players were grinding just as hard and questioned why only one person received the spotlight. A tennis journalist published an op-ed titled, "The Rolex Controversy Exposes Tennis's Privilege Problem," and the debate quickly shifted away from Eala herself and toward the sport as a whole, its financial disparities, lack of support for lower-ranked players, and a system that often rewards connections over opportunity. Eala found herself at the center of a conversation she never asked to lead. As other young players weighed in, some defended her, others stayed silent, and a few hinted at jealousy, including one rising star who cryptically posted that hard work should speak louder than gifts. The tennis world was deeply divided. Then Federer broke his silence with a short, powerful statement on social media, explaining that he had offered advice, support, and even gifts to many players over the years, mostly in private, and that Alex earned this moment not because of her ranking but because of her heart. For some, his words ended the debate. For others, they only sharpened it. In the end, the controversy was never just about a watch, it was about what tennis chooses to value and whether the sport is willing to celebrate fighters, not just winners. Months later, the headlines faded, but the impact remained. Eala's career took an unexpected turn when she won her first WTA title 3 months later, her confidence clearly buoyed by Federer's belief in her. She still wears the watch in interviews, still points to that night as a turning point, while the broader conversation it sparked forced the tennis world to confront uncomfortable truths about life on the lower-tier circuits, where most players struggle in obscurity and recognition is rarely given before success arrives. Federer's gesture became a symbol, intentional or not, of how belief can change everything, even as it exposed jealousy, resentment, and the harsh reality that fairness in sport is often an illusion. Eala has handled it with grace, using her platform to advocate for better support for lower-ranked players and to speak openly about mental health, financial strain, and the loneliness of the tour. Federer, meanwhile, continues to mentor quietly, reaching out to players who remind him of his younger self, offering guidance, encouragement, and occasional gifts whose meaning far exceeds their price. The Rolex Daytona still rests on Eala's wrist, a reminder of a conversation in a Wimbledon locker room, a symbol of resilience, and a message engraved in gold to those who fight beyond the baseline. So was it simply a generous act from a legend to a rising star, or a moment that exposed deep inequalities in tennis? Perhaps it was both, and that is what makes it powerful. In a sport obsessed with rankings and trophies, Roger Federer chose to honor something else: the fight, the heart, and the refusal to quit, reminding us that sometimes being seen is worth more than any title.